Let me ask you something radical, but honest. What if the problem isn't you? What if it never was? What if your poor time management only looks that way because the workplace was designed for linear, single-task thinkers? What if your emotional dysregulation is actually a completely appropriate response to constant invalidation and sensory overwhelm? What if the reason you feel like you're always behind, always failing, always too much or not enough is because the system measuring your worth was never designed with your brain in mind? You are not struggling in a vacuum. You are navigating systems that pathologize difference, that punish access needs, that mistake masking for progress, and silence for success. Hi, I'm Essie. I'm an autistic and ADHD therapist. Today, I want to shift the lens. I want to focus on how environments, family, school, culture, work, medicine create and reinforce harm for neurodivergence, and how healing begins when we stop internalizing that harm as a personal failure. When things aren't working, when we're overwhelmed, burnt out, or shut down, the first place most of us look is inward. We say, I just need to get more organized. I should try harder. I'm the only one who can't handle this. What's wrong with me? And when those internal fixes don't work, we don't question the system. We double down on the self-blame. Why? Because neurodivergents were taught that struggle is a personal failure, that if the classroom is too loud, we should learn to cope. If the workplace is too chaotic, we should get better at time management. If relationships are exhausting, we should be more emotionally resilient. We were taught to accommodate the environment, not the other way around. So when we burn out, when we mask so hard we forget who we are, when we fall apart after holding it together all day, we don't say the system is unworkable. We say I'm broken. This is what ableist systems do. They offload their own dysfunction onto the people who don't thrive within them. A classroom without flexibility becomes a child's behavioral problem. A rigid 9 to 5 becomes your executive dysfunction. A sensory hostile office becomes your poor work ethic. A mental health system built around compliance becomes your treatment-resistant label. And the longer we're inside these systems, the more evidence they gather to prove their point. They say, you're the common denominator. You're the one who keeps failing. Everyone else seems fine. Why can't you adapt? But what if everyone else is just silently drowning too? Or worse, benefiting from a system that rewards sameness and punishes divergence? What if the system is defective, not you? The myth of the individual problem is so powerful because it keeps us isolated. It tells us that if we just worked harder, regulated better, showed up right, we'd finally be okay. But you can't self-improve your way out of structural harm. You can't therapize your way out of sensory overload. You can't meditate your way out of chronic dismissal. Sometimes the system is the trauma, and the most radical act you can take is to stop blaming yourself for what was never your fault. So what does it look like when the systems create the problem, but the individuals get the blame? Let's start with school. You're a kid who can't sit still, or you talk too much, or too little. You cry when things feel overwhelming. You fidget to self-regulate. But instead of anyone asking what you need, you get labeled disruptive, disobedient, defiant. You learn quickly that compliance is safer than authenticity. And if you're quiet, maybe too quiet, you get praised for being easy, even if you're dissociating. Even if you're masking so hard, you go home exhausted. Your struggle is invisible, so it doesn't count. Then comes work. You can't handle the open office noise, the back-to-back meetings, the social politics. You ask for flexibility and get told, that's just how it is. We can't make exceptions. It's not fair on the others. So you mask harder. You push through until the inevitable burnout hits. And now you're the problem, labeled lazy, unreliable, fragile, not a team player. But no one asks, why was the job designed this way in the first place? Who gets to thrive and who's forced to bend until they break? Or take healthcare. You come in with real systems, pain, fatigue, sensory distress, burnout, executive dysfunction, but you're not believed. Your autism is dismissed as anxiety. Your ADHD is blamed on laziness or tech overuse. Your communication style is labeled dramatic or manipulative. You might even be told, "You seem fine. You're very articulate. Maybe you're just sensitive." You're pushed toward treatments that ignore your actual needs and then blamed when they don't work. That's not healing, that's harm. And then there's the everyday relationships. You're too intense. You take things personally. You make everything about you. People say they love how honest you are until you're honest about something that makes them uncomfortable. You walk on eggshells. You apologize for needing clarity, reassurance, space, structure. Eventually, you start assuming that if a relationship doesn't work, it must be your fault. But maybe it didn't fail because you were too much. Maybe it failed because no one taught the other person how to relate to someone different from them, or how to value neurodivergent ways of being. These are patterns we've been taught to internalize, patterns that say, if you're not thriving, try harder. If it hurts, be more grateful. If you're not like them, fake it. But what if we stopped asking how to fit in and started asking how to make the space fit us? Because when environments are built without us in mind, of course we struggle. That's structural neglect. Eventually, you don't need anyone else to criticize you. You do it yourself. Because when you grow up inside systems that punish difference, you learn to police your own difference automatically. You learn to monitor your tone, your volume, your enthusiasm. You learn to phrase your needs in just the right way, or not at all. You talk yourself out of asking for accommodations before anyone else can say no. And you tell yourself, I don't want to be a burden. It's probably not a big deal. Other people have it worse. I should be able to handle this. That's internalized ableism. That's the system living inside you, whispering its rules long after the authority figures are gone. You skip the sensory breaks even when you're melting down inside. You go to the party even though your body is screaming no. You don't disclose your diagnosis because you've seen what happens when you do. So now the mask is a performance you've rehearsed so well, you barely notice it anymore. And here's the catch. The system rewards this. You're praised for being resilient, for overcoming your challenges, for not letting your diagnosis define you. And what they're really saying is, thank you for not making us change. Thank you for keeping your needs invisible. Thank you for doing the work of fitting in so we don't have to make space. Tolerance in this case is conditional, and it comes at a cost to your body, your identity, your sense of self. Because every time you override your needs to stay acceptable, every time you self-censor, self-silence, self-erase, you reinforce the message, my survival depends on being less like me. It's easy to blame yourself here, but we should recognize that's what happens when systems fail us, and then teach us to keep failing ourselves on their behalf. But it doesn't have to stay that way. Everything we've talked about so far, the burnout, the shame, the overaccommodation, the self-policing, it's heavy. And if you're feeling a little grief right now, that makes sense. Because realizing the problem wasn't you all along can be both freeing and devastating. Freeing because it gives you language for what you've experienced. Devastating because it means so much of your suffering was unnecessary. And here's the most painful part. When you stop blaming yourself, you often realize how many people around you still do. People who say they support you but don't adapt for you. People who praise your resilience but never question the pressure that made you resilient in the first place. People who love the version of you that makes their life easier, but not the full, complex you who needs things they weren't taught to understand. So what do we do with that? We shift the frame. We stop asking, how can I fix myself to survive the system? And start asking, what would the system look like if it were actually built to accommodate me? This shift is political, and it moves healing out of the individual and into the collective. We begin to say, my access needs are valid. My distress is information, not a flaw. I'm not failing. The environment is unadapted. My worth is not measured by how well I can pass as neurotypical. We stop treating survival strategies like personal failures. We stop confusing masking with growth. We stop accepting burnout as the price of belonging. And we start to understand that most of what we were taught to call symptoms were actually responses to pressure, to punishment, to sensory overload, to cultural erasure. And when we see our struggles in context, in history, in systems, in ableism, we start to realize I wasn't asking too much of the world. I was asking too little. Before we can talk about building a better world, we have to pause and name what we lost living in this one. Because when you realize that the system was never built with you in mind, there's grief. Grief for the time you spent thinking you were the problem. Grief for the friendships you molded yourself to fit. Grief for the burnout that could have been avoided if someone had just made space. Grief for the years you spent trying to be resilient instead of being real. It's not about self-pity, it's about self-recognition. The moment of truth-telling. That wasn't fair. I should never have had to work that hard to feel safe. You may even find yourself grieving a version of you that never got to grow. The version that would have thrived in the right environment. The version that wasn't afraid to take up space or ask for help or dream big without apologizing. And it's okay to miss them, because grieving doesn't mean you're stuck in the past. It means you're finally acknowledging how much it cost to survive. But here's the thing about grief. It opens the door to reclamation. Once we stop trying to fix ourselves to fit a broken system, we can begin to ask deeper questions. Who am I when I'm not performing? What do I need to feel safe now? What kind of world would I build if I didn't have to recover from this one? You're allowed to mourn. You're allowed to be angry. You're allowed to say, I deserve better, because you did. And that grief, that clarity, can be fuel, not just for healing yourself, but for making something better together. The world wasn't built for neurodivergence. This is something we all know to be true. Not built for our sensory needs, not for our nonlinear brains, not for our depth, our honesty, our intensity, or our pace. It was built for standardization, for efficiency, for people who can conform or at least pretend to. So when you struggle, when you burn out, when you feel disconnected or broken, let's stop asking what's wrong with me and start asking what would it take to live in a world that makes room for me. We move our focus from personal healing to systemic change. And systemic change always starts with this shift in the story. The old story says, you're the problem. You're too sensitive. You just need to try harder. But the new story says, your needs are valid. Your perception is sharp. Your adaptations are brilliant. You've survived in a world that rarely made sense to you, and that's extraordinary. And once you stop blaming yourself, you can start advocating for yourself. You can start setting boundaries. You can say, this doesn't work for me without apology. You can take your needs seriously, even when no one else does yet. You can recognize you were never the problem. The system was just never designed to hold someone like you. And that doesn't mean it can't change, because systems are made of people, and people can learn. And people, especially people like you or me, can lead. Every time you speak your truth instead of shrinking, every time you ask for access instead of apologizing, every time you affirm someone else's divergence out loud, you are reshaping the world bit by bit, boundary by boundary, story by story. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and share it with anyone you think might benefit from my content. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.